What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, so before I get into this video, shout out once again to the brother Aram for showing love to the channel via the PayPal. He had a question, and his question was, who do I think is the better of the two between John Havlicek and Scottie Pippen? Two small forwards, both played for a very long time, especially relative to their eras in the NBA. Two all-time great defensive small forwards, defensive players, and multiple-time NBA champions. And they both played with the player that was the most winningest in their respective time periods. So you might remember, I don't know if some of you guys, how long some of you guys been subscribed to my channel, but I did a video about this a year ago, okay? And my answer has not changed. And that is that if you're talking about overall player, like who I think was overall better and who had the better peak, I have to go with John Havlicek, okay? Now, I will say that with John Havlicek, a lot of us don't have the benefit of a lot of video footage out there to make assessments, right? We have to go more off of reputation, word of mouth, statistics. There is some game footage out there, obviously. We all know some of the great moments that John Havlicek had as far as, that classic steal he had in Game 7. What was it, the 1965? I think that might have been the Western Division Finals or whatever it was called back then between the Celtics and the, not Western, Eastern. Between the Celtics and the Philadelphia Warriors, I guess. I gotta look to see what team that was. But anyway, when it comes to defense, I give Scottie Pippen a slight edge just because of his. I mean, this is a guy that arguably should have won Defensive Player of the Year at least once in his career, Scottie Pippen. And the players that he lost to, as far as the award is concerned, are legitimate top 5 all-time Defensive Player of the Year award winners, like Hakeem Olajuwon. Another guy that I think was up there as far as Defensive Player of the Year award winner, I believe David Robinson won it once. So yeah, on the defensive end, it's close, but I give the edge to Scottie. But the gap between the two on the defensive end is not quite as large as the gap is on the offensive end between the two. Okay. Scottie, I think, scored something around, I'm trying to think off the top of my head. Scottie scored, 17,000 points in his career, whereas John Havlicek scored 26,395. Scottie Pippen, was a relative. He had pretty good help for his career. He had injuries down the stretch after he turned 30. Did have some years where he missed a number of games, but he was relatively healthy for his career. Whereas John Havlicek is one of the most healthy players in NBA history, playing in 1,270 games during a 16-year stretch, a 16-year stint as far as his NBA career is concerned. They had pretty similar rebounding and assists / facilitating numbers and metrics. The difference being John Havlicek had a far more dominant peak than Scottie Pippen. Like Pippen's peak were like years where he averaged maybe like 21, 22 points, 7 rebounds, maybe 7 assists, 2 to 3 steals. Those are solid numbers, right? And yes, you could take into account the fact that the scoring was starting to slow a little bit at that point, but not to the nadir that we saw in the late 90s, early 2000s. But John Havlicek was having phenomenal years. I mean, John Havlicek was having seasons where, without the assist of a 3-point line, he was averaging like 28, 29 points a game. We're talking about 8 to 9 rebounds a game. We're talking about 5 to 6 assists per game. Okay. You're talking about, even though steals weren't calculated, he probably was averaging well over 2 steals per game in some of those years, you know? Also, Scottie Pippen was never sniffing anything near an NBA Finals MVP. Okay. Whereas, even though Jerry West won Finals MVP in 1969, you can make a strong case that had there been another candidate for it, it would have been John Havlicek. Okay. Also, John Havlicek won championships outside of the Bill Russell dynasty, where he was the leader of the team, although he did have the great Dave Cowens and JoJo White and some others on that squad. But he was the leader of championship teams outside of the Bill Russell era in 74 and 76. And also, I love to bring up that other year where they could have won a championship had it not been for an injury to John Havlicek, which was 1973. That year, Boston won 68 games. Not only did they win 68 games, but during the regular season, Tom Heinsohn, who was their head coach, was the head coach of the year. And had it not been for that injury to John Havlicek that late in that season, or that off season, the playoffs, they possibly could have beaten the Knicks in the conference finals, and could have won an additional title. At the end of the day, Havlicek was also the best player on the Boston Celtics. I would say, as far as finals teams or championship teams, 68, 69, 74, and 76. He was the best player on those teams. Whereas before that, the best player on those Celtics teams were usually Bill Russell, sometimes maybe Bob Cousy, or what have you, right? So when you look at even the 6 championship rings, well, John Havlicek had 8. And then you can go, well, Pippen went 6-0 in the finals. Well, then I can say that John Havlicek went 8-0 in the finals. So there's really no metric outside of defense, which is still very close, where you can really definitively say that Scottie Pippen was better than John Havlicek. So to me, it's a no-brainer. The better player is John Havlicek, which is why I have a problem, among other things, with this new Bleachers Report list, because the fact that Scottie Pippen and John Havlicek are that close together is poppycock. Explain something else to me. How is it, and no disrespect to the great Dikembe Mutombo, but how is it that Dikembe Mutombo is on this list, but not Nate Thurman, who shared a birthday, a posthumous birthday today? How is it that Jason Tatum is on this list, right, but Walt Bellamy's not? Walt Bellamy, a guy who scored, I think, almost 25,000 points in his career and over 10,000 rebounds. Might have been 11, 12,000 rebounds. I got to look at the totals. How is that possible? Where's Artis Gilmore? Art I think is 100, I think. But yeah, if Art's on the list, how is Nate Thurman on the list. You see what I'm saying? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Nate is one of 3 players in the history of the NBA to grab at least 42 rebounds in an official game. I think he did against the Detroit Pistons in 1965, I think it was. Not 65, 66 season. So that list is very, very suspect. It doesn't make any sense. I think that list was hastily done. I think it was done by a bunch of homers who don't really know what the fuck they're doing. But anyway, in conclusion, I give the definitive nod to John Havlicek, who I think is a top 25 all-time player. And in my opinion, Scottie Pippen is more of a top 45 to 50 all-time player. I think this list was a con job just to push Scottie Pippen up, while, as you know it, push everybody that played with a certain guy that comes from Akron. And I'm not talking about Nate Thurman, and I'm not talking about Stephen Waddell Curry, at least not in this context. Push all the players who play with a certain guy down. Anyway, that's all I got to say about it.